expected points, clean sheet odds, who is the best captain, and I've got a couple other bits of data chucked in as well. This video has got all of the information you need to know ahead of Game Week 8. So I'm going to start this ultimate guide video, as I do with all the others, by going through the top players for expected points by position. I've got a view of each position for just Game Week 8 in isolation, and then I've also done the next 5 game weeks. I think, obviously, when picking players, you want to be cognizant of how many points they're expected to score in the next game week. But if you're using transfers to buy players, I mean, you're probably going to want to be sure that they're going to be decent for at least, I'd say, 3 to 5 game weeks. So that's the reason I'm doing that. For Game Week 8, though, Raya is the top goalkeeper for expected points on 4.4. Got Edison 4.1, Nick Pope, Muric, Ramsdale, Pickford and Onana are your top keepers. Usually, I would say the top goalkeeper list is quite predictable just because there are so few goalkeepers in the league, right? Every team has a number one, which means there are only 20 that are really pickable. So naturally, you're going to see a more predictable list for these kinds of players. I'd say where the real value comes in is looking at the future projections and just how the good goalkeepers compare to one another, I would say. So the Fantasy Football Hub expected points model has Edison as the number one goalkeeper for expected points for the next 5 game weeks. But it is really close between him and David Raya. You can see there, Edison 21.3, David Raya 20.9. So literally 0.4 points in it, right? Jordan Pickford is really close as well on 19.2. I'd actually argue, looking at those predicted points data, particularly for Jordan Pickford, because I think he's tried and trusted over, well, certainly last season, he was the highest scoring goalkeeper in the game. And certainly when Branthwaite gets back fit for Everton, I think they'll improve defensively. I would definitely question just over one expected points different over 5 game weeks, but he saves you nearly $1 million. That feels kind of worth it to me. I personally would have Jordan Pickford as my personal number one pick as value goalkeeper for the next 5 weeks. Flecken's up there as well. Brentford have great fixtures. He's, I think, still leading the league for saves, but he hasn't kept a clean sheet yet. Emiliano Martinez is up there. Aston Villa have kept 2 clean sheets on the bounce, one against Bayern Munich, one against Man United, but I think the one against Man United was their first clean sheet in the Premier League for, it might be almost or literally a whole calendar year. Onana, I've actually backed Onana on a couple of my videos now to be the top scoring goalkeeper this entire season. I'm not saying Man United are a fantastic defence, but I don't actually think you necessarily want to be picking a goalkeeper from a great defence, particularly a defence that doesn't concede any shots, because there's no opportunity for them to get saves bonus. Whereas I think Man United, and particularly Onana, what I want from an FPL goalkeeper might differ from your opinions, but I want one that keeps a decent amount of clean sheets, which I do think Man United will do. They've got 4 from 7 games, I believe it is so far. But you also want a goalkeeper that gets consistent saves points. And that, with the amount of shots that Man United concede, I do expect it to be better than last season this season. I think that leaves Onana in a really good spot, and you've got Leno there as well. I'll stop rambling about keepers now. Defenders up next then, and the top for Game Week 8 are Guardiola and Trent, both on 4.9 expected points. Guardiola is right up there as well, barely anything in it. He's on 4.8. You got Romero and Pedro Porro of Spurs, both got a fairly decent fixture. Interesting that Romero is higher for expected points than Porro. I'd probably flip them the other way around if it was my opinion. Robertson up there as well, putting up some really decent attacking data for Liverpool. Not really on the level at all of Trent, but he's better than the other Liverpool defenders that are alongside him. And they've kept, 5 clean sheets from 7 games so far? And then Leif Davis of Ipswich. I made a video, by the way, going through my favourite players at each price point by position so far this season. You can check that out on my channel. But Leif Davis is second in the Premier League for expected goal involvements across all defenders. So just something to bear in mind there. Over the next 5 weeks, I'm kind of kicking myself because the leading defender for expected points over the next 5 is Guardiola. The only thing that would kind of stop him from doing well, in my opinion, well, there's a couple of things. Man City just don't seem capable of keeping clean sheets. They just keep conceding goals, whether that be a slight mistake from Edison or the opposition just scoring an absolute wonder goal against them. They just keep conceding goals. So he's up there for expected points, and you can't deny, projection-wise, Man City feel like a team that are going to keep clean sheets, but it's just not coming to fruition. So that's something I would bear in mind about Guardiola. He's also going to share attacking responsibilities with Rico Lewis at times, I think. We saw at the start of the season when both him and Rico Lewis were playing in defence. Rico Lewis was the inverted fullback that was getting forward, and Guardiola was sitting back in kind of that back three that Pep likes to play with the inverted fullback. So another thing to bear in mind. Trent, the Liverpool fixtures kind of changed a little bit, but he's still up there as one of the top defenders. Gabriel Robertson, a couple of Man City defenders in Diaz and Akanji. I don't really like these guys at all because I don't think they offer a whole lot of goal threat. And similar to Guardiola, well, obviously the same as Guardiola, Man City just don't seem to be able to keep clean sheets. And you got Virgil van Dijk there as well. I mentioned that Robertson is definitely the second best Liverpool defender from an attacking perspective, but we have seen him benched already in the Premier League. And I would say when he's fit, Van Dijk is going to play all 38 Premier League games. So the decision between Robertson and Van Dijk is really attacking return likelihood plus limited minutes, or less expected minutes, or less attacking returns and more expected minutes. That's kind of the decision to make between the two. And ultimately, well, you can see it there in the expected points. The Fantasy Football Hub model backs Robertson, but I think Van Dijk's minutes will come into play as well. Midfielders then, and Salah tops the list for Game Week 8, and it's not really even close. Despite Cole Palmer having an amazing start to the season, and literally being, across the last 2 seasons as well, the highest goal plus assist or attacking returns player in the entire Premier League, Salah's still higher for expected points. 8.3 compared to Palmer's 6.6. Anthony Gordon's up there. I think the penalties is a big factor with him, and the fact he's been putting up still some pretty decent underlying data. He's on 6. James Maddison. Eze still appears on this list, which as an Eze owner I absolutely hate to see because it gives me more reason to keep him. Saka, we'll see the extent of his injury. I don't know any more than you guys know now. Obviously limped away, left the England camp. I don't know any more about the injury at this stage, and Arteta will definitely, I would imagine, be a bit coy about it. Unless Saka was 100% ready and nailed on to go, he might say that. But if there was any sort of bit of doubt about Saka's minutes, Arteta's going to keep coy about that. So just something to bear in mind if you're considering either buying him or are an owner. You know, if it's looking either unlikely or, you know, there's a chance that he doesn't play, you probably won't know about it until after the deadline. And then in Mbeumo, who's just been a season hero so far, you'd always expect to see him on these lists. So for the next 5 game weeks then, it's still Salah as the number 1. But this is the argument I guess you can make against Salah. He is 2 million more expensive than Palmer and is 3.4 expected points over 5 game weeks. According to this projection, at least, yours might be different. Is that worth it? That's the question you kind of have to ask, because by selling Salah, you could allow upgrades to someone to Cole Palmer and then also might be able to squeeze Saka in. And that would allow you to have Saka and Palmer instead of Salah and someone a bit cheaper. Just something to bear in mind. That's something I'm thinking about doing with my team, although the fact that Saka is potentially injured has kind of kiboshed that in a way. Eze's up there, still up there, can't believe it really, but he's actually higher than Brian and Mbeumo, which, yeah, I don't need any more reasons to keep Eze in my team, but the Fantasy Football Hub expected points just keeps giving me some. Anthony Gordon and Maddison are also up there as the top 5 midfielders. I thought it was quite interesting to see Eze and Gordon hanging on. I think the predicted points model from Fantasy Football Hub, it takes into account, obviously, and heavily, the 7 games that have been played so far this season, but it also takes into account historic data. And as we know, right, Eze and Gordon are tried and trusted Premier League assets that score goals and get assists, right? And I think that's factored into this expected points data. When you look at the underlying numbers these 2 players have been putting up as well, they're not too far off some of the players on this list. It's just they haven't been able to, well, their teammates haven't been able to convert their assists, or the players themselves haven't been able to convert their chances to goals. And that's kind of the story behind it so far. So these are your top midfielders for expected points for the next 5. Forwards then. The number 1, is there any surprise? The number 1 forward for expected points for Game Week 8 is Erling Haaland. Chris Wood in 2nd place, Solanke in 3rd, followed by Watkins, Raul Jimenez, Cunha and Nicholas Jackson. I got to say, if you were to ask me to pick out my 7 favourite forwards in FPL right now, I'd tell you these 7 players. I don't think I need to say any more than that. And for the next 5 game weeks, well, most of these 7 players appear on this list. So we got Haaland, Wood, Havertz is up there, who you kind of have to agree is a decent option when he does play as a centre forward. With Havertz, unfortunately, with the Odegaard injury, there is a chance in some games that he plays in midfield. And for me, that is a bit of a risk. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily want to spend 8.3 million on a forward that could play in midfield, whereas Solanke, 7.6 million, is going to play up front every game, for example. And the expected points, you know, pretty similar for the 2 players. Watkins, Cunha and Isak's up there as well. Isak, I think the model has him sort of limited expected minutes in game week 8 and then picking up 9, 10, 11 onwards, he could be a nice differential if he's back fit relatively soon after the international break and back in form. The thing I would say about Isak is I think he was carrying a knock from the start of the season, and that's why his performances have been nowhere near as good as they have been. That's just my personal opinion. I've got nothing to back that. Just watching him in a couple of games, it's looked like he's been carrying something for a little while. Next up then, we've got the captaincy. Interesting. FF Hub, Fantasy Football Hub, their expected points data currently have Salah above Haaland for expected points at the time of recording this video. Interesting. Haaland has got, what's that, Wolves away, and Salah has Chelsea at home. So I'll leave that up to you as to whether you agree with that data, but I thought I'd present it as it shows in the tool. I think these two are far and away above the rest of the players on this list that I probably wouldn't captain anyone else at this stage. I think Salah and Haaland are kind of in a world of their own in terms of expected points. Interestingly, the fantasy, well, FPL review, not fantasy football, FPL review, which I always like to show at FPL review. I don't go through all of their data on this channel, but I do know some people really value the data, the expected variance, if that's what it's called, data that FPL review puts up. They have Haaland as the number one. Interestingly, Fantasy Football Hub doesn't feature Foden at all because of his limited minutes so far this season. The second best player in the league for expected points in game week 8 is Phil Foden, according to FPL review, so might be something to bear in mind for your team. Mo Salah is in third, joint with Phil Foden. Solanke is up there, and so is Anthony Gordon. So Anthony Gordon, interestingly, I've sold him in my team, but he is heavily backed by both the Fantasy Football Hub and FPL review points projections. All right then, on to some clean sheet odds data. This is courtesy of Drafthound. You can sign up to Drafthound using a link you'll find in the description. The top team for clean sheet odds in game week 8 currently is Man City. They sit on 45%. Arsenal against Bournemouth on 38%. Nottingham Forest also on 38%. One player I've spoken about in my defenders video, he appears, I think he's the 9th or 10th best defender so far in the league for expected goal involvement. And Nottingham Forest are always pretty good for clean sheet odds. They got good fixtures coming up, and for expected goals conceded and totals goals conceded, they're one of the best teams in the league. Milenkovic, I think, the 4.5 million centre-back from Forest, is a really good option. Bear him in mind as well. I spoke about him in my defenders video if you want some more information on that. Man United also on 36, Tottenham on 33. Usually, I don't like to start defenders with below 30% clean sheet odds. But here we've got 6 that are on 29. So Palace, Ipswich, Liverpool, Fulham, Newcastle, Southampton. Ultimately, I wouldn't be too uncomfortable starting defenders from those teams either. I would, maybe even Everton as well, depending on who they have back. Maybe even Leicester as well against Southampton, you know, and Aston Villa as well against Fulham. I guess there are multiple teams there, sort of above 25% that, you know, they could all feasibly keep clean sheets or, of course, concede goals. So lots of defensive options to pick there. And if you're choosing between two defenders at the moment that have 29% clean sheet odds, I don't envy you. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that. A boatload of like expected points, projected outcomes, clean sheet odds data to take you through. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you did, please leave me a like rating on the video. Let me know in the comments, like I said, if there are any interesting players you think of bringing into your team as a result of this video. Maybe that remaining goal involvements projection data or the clean sheet odds, something like that. You know, let me know if there's any transfer decisions you're making on the back of this video. I'd be interested to hear if it's actually helping people in that regard. And yeah, that leaves me to the end, I think. If you want to subscribe and haven't already, want to see more content from me in your feed, subscribe to the Golden Goal channel. It should be just there on your screen. That's everything. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.